Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sorting Hat Podcast, where anything and everything can and will be sorted. I, as always, am your host, Michael Barrity, joined by my co-host, Katie Reed.
Hello.
The basic conceit of this show, I, a Ravenclaw, and Katie is a Hufflepuff, are joined by a guest, and our guest today is the wonderful and talented Michael Bilo.
Hello.
Who has many accolades to his name. The first of which he is a co-host on the This Is Dark Matters podcast that you can see at the Pack Theater here in Los Angeles.
You might have heard of a previous episode with Frankie Gutman, and then also I help out on that show from time to time.
Yes, Michael Bilo is also a current PhD UCLA student in computational genetics and a two-time Jeopardy contestant and loser.
Actually, I'm a five-time contestant.
Five-time contestant,
Wow.
two-time loser.
Two-time loser.
I apologize. Sorry. Mixing those numbers up a little bit.
Michael Bilo, what you are studying is like the equivalent of when you don't know exactly what your dad does for a living. And you're like, I'm too embarrassed to think that, like, even if you explained it to me, I still wouldn't understand it.
That's possible.
Is it fair to say, because we actually did not ask this of you beforehand, you're a Ravenclaw, right? Yeah?
No.
You're not a Ravenclaw.
No.
You're a Gryffindor?
Nope.
What are you?
Slytherin.
Oh, my goodness.
All right.
Yep.
That's interesting. I'm not getting that read from you because
you got to spend like more than an hour.
This is true. This is true.
He's the biggest dick in the world.
I'm
but like
excited to see that
he's like
over
a
the
good
course
dick.
of this conversation.
Well, yeah, I think it'll be obvious.
So you're getting to really show some of that Slytherin haughtiness, I suppose, because we're covering the early films of Hayao Miyazaki.
The early films. You know, the good ones.
Yeah. So
Oh,
that
gosh.
that includes we've got Castle in the Sky, My Neighbor is Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service. Because none of us have seen it and we're assholes, we're skipping over Porco Rosso.
I guess like if somebody out there has seen it, tell us which house it goes into.
Right. And then we're going to close out with Princess Mononoke. So we're dealing with 4 films going from 1986 down to 1997. So a little more than a 10-year span. Shall we just dive into it?
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Can we give a little background maybe for people who haven't seen a film by Miyazaki, like a little bit about who he is?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Hayao Miyazaki is probably the most famous director of Japanese animated films that's both alive today and that has ever lived. He's made a lot of very beloved films. They're often considered films for children, but you know, they're very easily enjoyed by adults.
They have a lot of universal themes.
A lot of universal themes, a lot of environmental themes, a lot of strong female protagonists.
Yes.
He was also a manga artist before he became an anime director. His Studio Ghibli, it's spelled Ghibli, is the probably most well-known producer of like Japanese anime films out there. And so a lot of the time when people say Studio Ghibli films, they're actually referring to Miyazaki's films, even though there are a couple of other...
Yeah, he's somewhat synonymous with the company.
Yeah.
Although, there are a handful of other directors.
It feels like he's like a Japanese equivalent of Walt Disney, but it's important to like realize that Ghibli is not the Disney Animation Corp. Like it doesn't have that same sort of like like analogous connection.
Nor does it have theme parks yet.
No theme parks, as far as I know. I haven't looked into that.
I mean, there are a handful of museums and things like that celebrating Ghibli, but no rides of. Although a Kiki's Delivery Service ride would be
fantastic,
super fun. He's got a lot of themes that run through all of his pieces, like you'd mentioned, but like wind and air travel is like a big one. So I can just imagine if Imagineers
something I never really thought of, but
doing a little bit of cursory research, I found out also a running theme in his films are pigs. Apparently, like there are a lot of like it's just one of his calling cards, and it's in a lot of his films just to have a pig in there somewhere.
And like old women with giant heads, I feel are in multiple films. Maybe I'm only thinking of Spirited Away, which we're not talking about today, but it's probably Spirited Away is probably Miyazaki's most famous film in the West because it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, I think, back in 2001 or 2002. And we're not talking about it, but doesn't even deserve to be rated on this podcast. All I got to say.
Whoa. We got to have you back to do like your controversial Miyazaki opinions.
We'll go in for part 2 where it's you just being like, all of these more recent ones are so passe. Like,
sounds about right.
So jumping into Castle in the Sky, which I actually watched last night. I'd never seen it before. It is so fun. As far as like a debut piece, like from Ghibli and Miyazaki, it's like pretty damn astonishing. The basic premise, and either of you can jump in to cut me off, is that it opens, there's an airship, pirates board this airship, the government has a girl in captivity, that girl grabs a necklace and falls off of the airship, but this necklace that she grabbed has a stone on it, the stone glows, and she like is lightly descended from the sky to a machinery town ship area where this young boy Pozu sees her descend. He then basically protects her for a little bit as they're trying to figure out like, why are these pirates and government people trying to get this stone? And it's because the stone can lead them to a castle in the clouds called, and I'm blanking on the name. Laputa, yeah. And Laputa is this mythical ancient city of both like treasure and ancient technologies that supposedly was like light years ahead of the rest of the world. And there's robots that are involved, and also Pozu lost his father, and one of the like bits of mythology is that his father took a photo of Laputa. So he's like, I know it exists, but people shamed him and said that he was crazy, but I know like one day I'll find it. And so Shida, the girl, and Pozu basically are like, we have to get there to find it, but then pirates and the government are trying to catch them and get to Laputa for various nefarious reasons. But what's so fun is there's like a turn halfway through, and the government side turns out to be the bad side, like, which now by more conventional like Western standards is like, yeah, that's the turn that would come. Of course, that'd be what happened,
yeah.
But then Pozu and Shida wind up working with the pirates, and the pirates are so fun. Like, all of their characters are so goofy and wonderful. It's led by the matriarch, who's referred to by the crew as Mama, and then Papa like works just on like the engineering side of things. But she's like a great character, and she takes Shida under her wing and is so just like brash and crazy with like 2 wild pistols, and her character design is exceptional. I'm now just gushing about how great this film is.
It's a great film.
I'm going to cut you off to say sorry to our listeners for Michael being so highly offensive right now. And I will tell you why, Michael, and maybe you, Bilo. So an interesting thing I learned about this film was the floating city name actually is an allusion to Gulliver's Travels, which is really Laputa. But when they released this film in all Spanish-speaking cities, they actually countries, they had to change the name because Laputa is spelled like La Puta, which means the whore. So you've been saying a very offensive slur over and over again, Michael Bilo, and I do forgive you. But it's not very Ravenclaw of you.
It's okay because in this situation, that la and puta are together. There's no space.
But it was something that apparently they just didn't think to do because that word is meaningless in Japanese
Right.
and in English. Miyazaki has gone on record of saying if he had known, he would have not named it that at all. So that's just really great to think.
There's a famous ad from back in like the 70s or 60s where there was a car called the Chevy Nova, which in Spanish, Nova means doesn't go.
Yeah.
So,
I've heard this story.
So there was an ad in like Mexico for this car for Ford, which said Ford va Chevy Nova.
Oh no!
Yeah,
That was the Sega does what Nintendo don't sort of thing, right?
I've never heard of. I don't remember that one.
Oh
at least
god,
in my
that's
childhood.
cringy.
Just all of those, like, yeah, all those brands attacking other brands.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
it, like half the time it just like blows back in their face so stupidly or doesn't age well. But Nova is so funny.
Well, they've done a lot of them with the like Gulf airlines, like Emirates Air and like Qatar Airlines recently have had like big social media campaigns relating to United throwing a passenger out off a plane, ripping him out, smashing his face. And also when there was the ban on laptops on flights on like Royal Jordanian and Emirates, they like just use that as fodder for their campaign. So shading our government, I guess.
Yeah. But back to the film. At hand.
La puta film.
Based on, and if possible, I'd like to actually avoid trying to spoil the ending of the film.
Okay.
Which
that
is,
won't be a problem for me. I've not seen it.
well, I'm
just gonna guess the ending. They get married.
You're welcome to guess that. But I think we can speak broadly based on themes throughout, and that can probably lead us in a direction as to where we're going to be sorting it. It is worth noting, however, about 3/4 of the way through the film, they do make it to La Puta. And at that point, like, the larger thrust of the environmental theme that is very frequent in Miyazaki films, just like thrusts out of the
It does.
nowhere, really.
It does. It really shows up.
Yeah. Because within the center of the city is like a massive tree right by the graves of all of the royalty that existed there and everything like that.
Which is surprising that they're not completely inbred, but I guess it's probably not too hard to invite people to live on a castle that floats around and has like
we
cool
never
technology.
actually get a ton of what happened, like to lead to their demise. We just know when they arrive on La Puta, there's nothing there but these caretaker robots. That the design of them is wonderfully Ghibli and great because they're just like lanky, kind of Gort esque robots.
I'm sorry, Gort?
Is it Gort?
I don't know who.
From The Day the Earth Stood Still.
No
reference level
I don't
there.
remember that.
That like you've seen the image. It's like that very stocky, metallic robot thingle.
Is that the one that that Bender was from Futurama was kind of based on?
I don't know. But like he's just got like a very large, like generic automaton sort of look.
Yeah.
But in the case of this, they've kind of like bulbous out his shoulders and like made his arms more lanky.
Yep. That's a fun. A Gort is is sort of like a metallic Ken doll with no features.
Yeah.
Just looking at his
So
triangular.
from what you guys described, it seems like an adventure film, but maybe less of a hero's. I mean, maybe partly hero's journey, but using hero's journey, the film ends when they do or do not make it to the destination.
Well, the interesting thing about all Miyazaki films that I feel is like, you got to disregard Western
Storytelling tropes
because they're not nearly as present, I would argue.
And also he was probably like bending and playing with like even Eastern storytelling tropes, because I heard Miyazaki barely worked with screenplays at all when he was building his films. I heard like sometimes he would go in with like only half of the story done, and then he would just begin production, which is bonkers. I don't think that could ever happen in a Western animated film.
No,
Like-
having worked a little bit in animation, there is a lot of boarding and pre-pro and making sure that every piece is very meticulously laid.
Yeah.
So all the cogs can move as seamlessly as possible. And even then, there is going to be many a slowdown.
And I heard that accounts for the large disparity in quality in some of the films. Like sometimes that sort of dreamlike process of just a stream of consciousness works really well.
Yeah.
But then other times it does not translate, and you end up getting some of his films that are like less effective.
Yeah.
It's just so weird to be like, all right, let's do this for like 3 years. Okay, what's the story? We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we are going to get to the sorting of things, I feel despite the environmental message that this one does have more of a Gryffindor feel to it.
Gryffindor feel. Okay.
I feel, however, that Hufflepuff could be argued within there. I'm hesitant to even consider Ravenclaw within this, but you seem like you're about to pose something.
To me, like, there's a lot of table stakes. Like, what, like, I think, within, are we sorting like one each, or do they, like, can we only do one to?
Oh, no. We can assign multiple.
I see. We're
to a
not
house.
limited to like, we're talking about 4 movies and one's going in each house.
No.
Okay.
These could all end up being Slytherins.
Okay, all right. Well, then yes, I'll give you that. I think of the movies that we're going to talk about today, this one is probably the most the most technological and like the most about like research and ancient rediscovery. Which to me says it's the most Ravenclaw of the films.
That's interesting.
But I wouldn't say that is the dominant mode of any of the films.
There's always a very interesting balance, I feel, with Miyazaki in particular, where there's like some degree of technology, or actually even going so far to say Japanese culture in general has a wonderful like, hey, we're a very technologically savvy and like intertwined with our culture, like technology. I had the fortune of going to Tokyo, and you are wandering through, busy, bustling, like electronically lit streets that are psychedelic beyond all imagination. And you take like 2 blocks down, and there's a Shinto shrine that is like perfectly preserved, and it's a forest. Like, you forget that there is a city right there, and Miyazaki does this wonderful balancing act of like, you've got airships, which I guess I almost exclusively associate with like Final Fantasy sort of things, which is another Japanese RPG influence sort of tropey thing that they have, but they also balance the like fantastical ancient side with this like technological thing.
It's really interesting. Like, usually in American or Western sci-fi, you'll get less of like airship stuff that that I'm familiar with. It's usually like spacecraft or like stuff on the ground. But in Japanese, adventure and science fiction, you get a lot more of that, like that middle step of like, taking into the skies like an entire city.
They're very comfortable with fusing things, and they manage to do it so it all feels cohesive.
Right.
Whereas in the case of Western cinema and storytelling, I often feel that it's like we need to go to one extreme or to the other, and Japan has managed to find this like very comfortable middle ground because you've got planes and airships approaching a flying city, that has robots on it.
Yeah.
Like when I'm saying it, it sounds crazy, but they manage to like balance that all out really well.
Yeah, it's really interesting to be like, oh yeah, these are robots. And I don't know necessarily if that's the case here, but they're thousands of years old, and you're like, wait, what is even time? And that, and so you can really see where like American filmmakers like Lucas got like their inspiration from, of like the idea that advanced technology for us might not necessarily be something from the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's so beautiful and wonderful.
I also think to argue more in favor of Gryffindor is Pozu as a character is sort of chasing the idea of like upholding what his dad was saying existed. So there's that like drive to do that, which is he's being honorable for starters, of like, I have to uphold my father's name. But then he's also coming to the rescue of Sheeta.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's also befriending and like protecting the pirates, because like, so there's just like a lot of things that he's doing, while concurrent to that, Sheeta is coming around with all of like what her past represents and trying to own that. So like the two kid characters are like really, I mean, they're staying the course for good. And that's also like one of those weird things, because like oftentimes in Western cinema, you've got like your Save the Cat and like, what's the character's arc? And it's like, well, I'd go so far to say in a lot of these cases, like these characters are like, they started good, they end good. They kind of knew that the environment was important from the start. Like
they grow up a little bit.
They grow up a little bit, but it's more, it's less of like, I guess they have like a coming of age tale.
Mm-hmm. They learn something, you know. They find something out.
Right. But it's not like this huge, like, they were a dick before and now they like include everyone. Like they're a family man. Like it's not that. It's a lot more nuanced in that regard.
I agree.
Do we feel comfortable in sorting this as Gryffindor and shifting on, or is there more to unbox in Castle in the Sky?
No, I feel pretty confident that this is a Gryffindor through and through.
Through and through. Gryffindor.
All right, then let us dive into My Neighbor Totoro, which I have not seen since, I want to say, like late high school.
What are your memories of Totoro?
Cat bus. Totoro in the rain.
Mm-hmm. Big umbrella.
Little eyeballed critters.
Okay.
And truthfully, that's just about where it ends. I know he makes a bunch of like very kind of scary sounds throughout the movie.
Totoro, yeah. Well, they're sort of animal sounds that I guess might scare a kid.
But he's got like a wide mouth.
He's a huge mouth. Yeah, he makes a lot of weird noises.
Lead us through, Bilo, and I'm sure I will like click back in.
So my real memory of Totoro is of disappointment.
Disappointment.
Really?
Of disappointment, yes.
Like disappointment in
you were hyped on it.
Disappointment in one and only one regard, which is that this is it's called My Neighbor Totoro, or it is. Totoro is probably the most enduring like single character created by Miyazaki. You see Totoro pillows, you know, all over the place.
Yeah, no, it's like completely saturated into at least like the Japanese pop culture that we get over here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I have a big like huge oversized gray shirt with the big Totoro smile on it. And Totoro's, not to spoil this, but Totoro is in this movie for all of like 5 minutes.
So this is like a Silence of the Lambs situation where he's the Hannibal Lecter, but you remember that Hannibal Lecter, he's got an impact.
Presence,
but you don't. That's the thing, is like I saw My Neighbor Totoro when I was an adult, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I was really hyped. I was really hyped about like, what's Totoro gonna do when he shows up? And like, he does some fun stuff, but most of the time it's just like little kids playing and like, you know, family living in the countryside in Japan, and like that was. And I wonder how much he's going to be mentioned in the synopsis here. Okay, so there's a professor named Tatsuo Kusakabe, and he has 2 daughters named Satsuki and Mei. And they move into this old house so they can be closer to the hospital where the girl's mother is recovering from a long-term illness. So first thing that's little weird about the house is they have these animated dust creatures that have like these. They're these they're like dust bunnies come to life.
That they have eyes.
They have eyes. Yeah.
This is this thing that I remember.
They have eyes. These dust bunnies with eyes.
Oh yeah, I remember these.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I must have seen this film as a child, and I only have like the vaguest memories, and then like probably false memories implanted by the internet.
Yeah, I mean the gifs that exist around a lot of Miyazaki films. Are rampant on the internet.
Now, is it ever like?
And these dust and soot creatures are like in the movie for more than Totoro is. Just to think about how little Totoro there is in this movie, because they show up later again, but there's like way more dust and soot, like little cute fluffs, than there is giant big smile Totoro.
Gotcha. So, okay, what happens after they move in with the dust bunnies?
Okay, so then they're sort of like uncomfortable with the house because they move from the big city to like the countryside.
Gotcha.
And then when they get comfortable with it, the dust bunnies they float away. Okay, so one day May sees these one of the sisters. She sees two big rabbit-like ears, and she follows them under the house.
That's creepy on its face.
And then there's even more spirits down there. And so she follows them, and there's like this path through the kind of like woods around their house. It says it's a camphor tree. I didn't know that. So she meets this larger version of the same spirit. And it calls itself Totoro, sort of. It's basically making noise, but she thinks it calls itself Totoro.
Yeah.
So she falls asleep on this giant, potentially wild, but seemingly quite friendly animal spirit. And then Satsuki finds her, but when she finds her, she's sort of in the ground, or she's on the ground, and like this Totoro is nowhere to be found. So May keeps trying to show Satsuki the Totoro, or the tree, but she's never able to do it. And then her father kind of comforts her and says, like, Totoro's like a forest spirit, like, you know, he'll Totoro, he, she, or it will show itself when it's ready. Always think that Totoro is male, but that's just because male is the default in my brain. But Totoro could easily be female. Never.
Maybe it also comes from just the suffix of O, which is customarily in like gender association, like it's usually O opposed to an A.
I mean, I suppose. I think ro, like in like ko and me and b are common like ending syllables or phonemes or whatever for Japanese women's names. So kind of, I guess everything else gets thrown to men, but
so it's unclear.
it's like Totoro never expresses much of a gender.
Gotcha.
I don't think. I mean, Totoro has a somewhat deep voice, but I think if you heard a lady lion and a boy lion roaring, I don't know if you'd be able to tell a difference. Although I guess only male lions roar. It doesn't matter.
Really?
I think so. I think they're the ones who roar, and the lady lions purr. But male lions also purr. Cats, same deal. Okay. So one day it's rainy. Back to the movie. It's rainy. They're waiting for their father's bus, and they're worried when he doesn't. So he goes into town to teach because he's a professor, and he takes the bus to and from their place in the kind of boonies.
Are these girls not in school? What's happening?
They're like, it's like summer, maybe.
Oh, gotcha.
Maybe. They're plus
for the sake of this fantasy tale, we're not going to deal with all the intricacies of moving.
In none of these films, I believe, do children ever go to school. So
yeah, or like even have anyone like super worried about keeping an eye on them.
Like Pozu is in Castle in the Sky, like working in a machinery, like with like boilers, right? And he's definitely 13 at most.
And that like harkens to like I don't know, the Japanese seem, I mean, everybody is like really obsessed with like the Industrial Revolution and the idea of like every like person who's able to like working like that.
Yeah, I think that is a very Japanese thing, is to like really devote yourself to your work.
Yeah.
Devoting yourself to your work, contributing to society,
Yeah.
the betterment of, and
So
helping
what the
your
hell
fellow
are these
man.
kids doing? They're just waiting around for forest spirits to show up. Get yourself a factory, kid.
Well, they're being like devoted to their family, so they're also doing some amount of work.
Sure. And like that's weird though to me. Like the dad's like, all right, I gotta go teach. It's wait around for Totoro, I guess. See you guys.
So much to the kids' delight, the Mei is the smaller one. She falls asleep, and Satsuki puts her on her back, and then Totoro shows up. Bam,
This is the first time she sees him.
This is the first time that Satsuki sees Totoro.
Yeah, okay.
And then Totoro shows up. They're waiting for their father's bus, and this is where I suspected the film was going to take a dark turn. When the cat bus shows up.
Oh.
Cat bus is craziness.
Yeah, so Satsuki gives there's a very fun and kind of important scene where Satsuki gives him an umbrella, and then it's this comically huge umbrella because Totoro is like, I don't know, 9 feet tall and like 5 or 6 feet wide,
Like Andre the Giant. Yeah.
sized creature. And like Totoro is very happy with this umbrella, and he opens it up above his head, and it's very cute. Okay, and then basically the bus, a giant cat bus. It's the best way to describe
Cat
it.
bus?
It's a cat. It's a bus shaped like a cat, and
it's got a face like a cat, and it like blinks, and it when it like its eyes are lights,
And then you can just go inside of it.
So what happens is that when Totoro, which is like as high as the bus is tall, wants to, and wider than the bus's door like opens, it's like a hole in this cat, and the hole in the cat widens,
God,
and Totoro steps through.
Little door cavity. Oh God.
So Totoro gives him some seeds. They plant these seeds, and then they see Totoro and his like little buddies having a dance around the seeds that he gave the girls. And then the girls, they come in, they join the dance, and the seeds sprout. And they grow into a huge tree. Huge. A lot of trees. I don't think we'll survive one of these movies without a big tree. Maybe Kiki's delivery service doesn't have a tree. Doesn't have a big tree. Anyway, this one has a big tree.
It's got trees, but not a big tree.
Yeah, this one has a big tree. And then this is like, remember, at this point we've seen Totoro in the film for like minute and a half, probably 90 seconds up to this point.
I feel like you're being disingenuous
And
with your time estimates.
Here's the other 3.5 minutes of Totoro, and it's like the best. This is what the entire movie should have been, is Totoro takes the girls, cat bus shows up, they get on, and they just have this like magical romp. It's amazing. And then they have this real like romp through the wide world. They see everything, and then they come back, and like the girls are sleeping, so maybe it was a dream.
Right.
Maybe it wasn't a dream. It wasn't a dream. Okay, it was real, clearly. Okay. And then it takes the other sort of sad turn, which is that they were going to go visit their mother, but their mother had a setback in their treatment. And so the littler girl disappears, the little girl disappears. The older sister Satsuki goes and finds her, and then she summons Totoro. Totoro gets the cat bus, and the cat bus takes the older sister to find the younger sister, and then the cat bus takes them to the hospital to see their mom. And like obviously this is like the big moment of worry, so we'll cut it off right there.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Just in you telling it back, and like strangely so much of this didn't like click back into place for me. Usually when I'm hearing things back, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that, but it really has been a while. But it seems to me, and you can discuss more on the thematics, but I feel like a lot of this is Totoro in many ways for the girls is acting as like a coping mechanism and offering support and a bit of solace from like the obvious weight of their mother being gravely ill.
Mother's very sick. They've moved to, a new house. They moved from the city to the country. So a lot of changes.
A lot of change, a lot of upset in their life.
Yeah, and like a lot of it, you see glimpses of this obviously in other works by Miyazaki, but this one like definitely gives that most like how kid logic and kid experience like refracts and like it's not quite the reality. It's just what they're perceiving, and they fill in the blanks with like all kinds, like it's just like whatever makes the most sense to them, but doesn't necessarily follow a logical thread that we as adults would have. So like, yeah, if the mother's in the hospital, hospitals are where people potentially go to die, and like they don't have any other information. So like there's just like that, and then like their father being absent because he just has to work, but it can feel way more alienating and lonely than it actually ends up being. And so just like either to manifest or create these creatures helps you just get through the day when like you haven't lived so long that days don't feel like eons long.
Right.
There's a part of me that, based on what's been said and based on just like my thematic perceptions on your telling of things, that this does have a Hufflepuff sort of vibe to it.
I think so. I think this is a pretty clear Hufflepuff of
when
film.
you're imbuing humanity into a dust speck, when you can see like something to love and or at least identify with a piece of with a dust buddy, that's Hufflepuff as hell.
Yeah, I mean you put big eyes on anything and suddenly like you know it's got emotion and you love it. Not as much as you love Totoro, but
although I don't know if, and this we're not discussing it, but in Spirited Away there are a lot of little critters with eyeballs.
Apparently we are.
And I don't necessarily feel that with the inclusion of those sort of critters that it would necessarily put Spirited Away in a Hufflepuff camp. But
oh no, but Spirited Away just has like way more going on in it.
Yes.
Whereas this one is like it has like some definitely like what's going on moments, but like it feels like less.
I think the
busy.
simplicity to it makes it more inclined to be a Hufflepuff. Cool. Kiki's Delivery Service.
Oh, this one is one of my favorites.
Oh man,
probably because it was maybe the first one I ever saw.
Do you want to summarize it?
Oh sure, 1 second. I'll just pull up this.
I mean, in the simplest terms, if I can just jump in.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, Katie.
Sure.
But it's really a movie about nothing.
Oh yeah, but in like the most beautiful way, like. Right. It's about witchcraft, witches are real in this universe, but as far as I can remember, it's just kind of just a vocation you can have.
Yeah, right.
If you happen to possess the powers to have them.
Right.
This one is from 1989. And basically the plot is it's a 13-year-old girl.
Again, not going into like school or anything.
Yeah.
She's a witch. She's
a witch.
Got a job.
And at 13
she leaves her home city and flies to like a bigger one. It's like I remember being like a coastal or like port city.
It's got like a San Francisco Parisian vibe to it.
And so according to the plot synopsis, so she arrives in the city ready to like find a new job. She's got her familiar spirit, a cat named Gigi, who I believe was played by Phil Hartman in the American dubbed version. It was the last film credit Phil Hartman ever had, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, that's the last thing he ever did acting on. She meets this. She's being pursued. She like meets and is pursued by this guy named Tombo, who's like this boy who's just obsessed with aviation.
Again, like Miyazaki and flying, it's like a thing.
The cat bus sort of flies.
Yeah.
Cat bus sort of flies,
it
but
leaps
like
long distances.
But I mean, with like Wind Rises, it's like, oh, do you like fly?
Well, I mean, that was literally about airplanes.
Right. But he's always got like an aviation person. Like the fact that, I mean, like it's airships in Castle and Sky.
And in Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, she flies this like very cool hang glider.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Kiki basically like finds a bakery run by this really nice old woman named Osono, and like Osono's like, oh, you can just stay here if you want to like work for me and do deliveries, and so that's where the
she's just like, I have an attic, it's open, I'm pregnant, so like I could use a little help like occasionally, and if you do that, like we're cool and you can run your delivery service from my place. Like
I will rent to you, 13-year-old girl. Don't spend it all on limited to accessories.
What's the age of adulthood in Japan, and like what would it
20?
It's 20.
Yeah.
And like I don't know that.
Like the age of adulthood is 20. Yeah.
But there's still like
but I think
there's a lot of like pieces of media in Japanese culture like about like children basically being emancipated and going off in the world to just like find their fortune or their destiny, and like parents are very much like, heck yeah, just walk that way into the woods, young man.
Ash is 10 years old in Pokemon.
And so so basically this is just a film about her trying to get her footing, both like it feels like she starts the film kind of less comfortable or sure in her powers, and like over time becomes more
the interesting
more self-actualized
is, so she arrives in the city, and like one of the first things even before she's arrived is she's conscious of what she's wearing.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I don't want to wear this. And her mom, who is also a witch, is like, honey, this is the customary thing that you wear. And she never changes her outfit the whole time. But there are several points throughout the movie where like she'll see other girls in the city who are like dressed really nicely, or she'll eye some shoes in a shop, but like based on her financial strain, like she can't buy it. But like she's obviously worried about how she's perceived. And then the other thing is she befriends a lot of people throughout the whole movie, and it's just like, again, this is one of those like, she is inherently good, and just like throughout the whole movie she is good, like that doesn't change, but she wavers in like her like belief in herself,
her confidence, because she goes from like bungling like very simple deliveries to at the end like saving the life of a person. I won't like give the whole ending, but like she goes from that completely like, oh shucks, I don't know, to like being able to be like, no, this when the pressure's on, I can handle things.
Although throughout that point, like the rescue, that's when her confidence is at her lowest, and like the whole rescue is like a real struggle, as she doesn't have her broom, she has to steal somebody else's, and it's like, I mean,
it reminds me of every first day of every job I've ever had. Like no matter, even if I was like born to do it, built to do it, there's something about going into a new place that just gives you that imposter syndrome. Like I feel like this is exactly what that is. This is Kiki's imposter syndrome.
It's interesting because she starts being so eager, and then she has a brief encounter with another witch.
Can I give you guys a metaphor that like will make everyone groan and
better
feel like
better not be a simile.
Kiki is an improv student where when you go in, you've taken like maybe one other workshop or class, and so you're like, I understand all of this, I am the best at this, and then by the time you get to advanced study, every move that you make in improv, you're like, is this the right one? But when you do you hit so much harder than you ever would when you started.
I guess I can see that tracking. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because throughout, like, she has points where she's questioning a lot, mostly about herself and her own abilities. And then there's this artist that she befriends, who comes back into the city after she loses her powers for no real.
Kiki loses her powers.
Kiki loses her powers to fly, and subsequently can't speak to her cat, which when you watch the film, you're actually, until she doesn't understand the cat, you aren't sure as a viewer as to whether or not, other people can hear the cat. Like it's a strangely unclear factor, because while I was watching initially, I was like, so is everybody can hear the cat? Or because like they were never acknowledging it, but it might have been in the same vein of, well, there are witches,
that's
so
great.
like there can also be talking cats, and that's the normalcy.
Now, Michael, are you watching dubs of these?
In the case of this particular one, I did see a dubbed version.
Shameful.
But in the case of, she referenced Phil Hartman, and that didn't get a shameful.
She could know that without. Katie could know that without.
But in the case of Totoro, Castle in the Sky, and Princess Mononoke, I've seen them subtitled.
Yep.
But is there a very clear distinction in the
that
subtitle
plot point?
version?
I mean, the thing is that one of the things that Ghibli does really well is they get like amazing American voice actors. So like for their dubs.
Dub versions, yeah.
So the dub versions are generally like pretty good.
They're gonna be better than most other dubbed anime,
Right.
where like they
No, and
barely try to even get the story right.
I felt it was pretty well done, but you were saying
it is well done. Like no question about that. Like Ponyo has like Tina Fey in an amazing role as the mom in that movie.
Yeah.
She's so good.
but it's still like the dub
wait,
versions
you watched the dub version?
upon you.
Yeah, and the sub.
Oh,
Duh.
okay.
Doesn't mean listen.
But I'll agree with you. Like you're gonna have gaps and things that they're just like, well, we have to try to make this understandable to like anybody like American who goes to see this, or like in other English speaking countries. So I can understand like they would just cut complete things out, jokes.
But how does this
references.
solve this cat issue?
So I guess if you, I mean, I don't remember like how the subtitled version of it was. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. It seemed like you would watch the dub, and I wanted to mention
It might be
that,
more
like,
clear if you'd seen the Japanese version.
maybe.
I mean, it hardly matters. Really, Gigi serves mostly for expositional sort of stuff, and is used as he's used as a plot point once, but otherwise, or twice. Sorry, as he has to be a replacement for a toy, and then also as the like, oh, I'm losing my powers. Like that's
right.
But primarily, he's just like, do we have enough money for this? Are you feeling okay?
Definitely like a Benvolio from Romeo and Juliet sort of character, where like I'm serving to keep the exposition going, but like I'm a very charismatic character, so you don't feel like it's quite as clumsy when I do it.
And yeah, like in the dub, he's got like a snark to him that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
But so I didn't even get to the. I kept talking about the artist and then never actually discussing it. So the artist comes back after Kiki is upset about losing her powers, and they have like a slumber party basically in her cabin, the artist's cabin, where they talk about like, oh, sometimes as an artist, I lose my confidence in myself, or like I'm trying to paint and nothing's coming to me.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean I'm not an artist anymore or should give up on that.
Yeah.
I just like need to find inspiration elsewhere. And like, I saw your face and like you inspired me to do this. And like, so now you're here and I'm able to do this again. And so like, you just need a catalyst or a thing to like get you that. And basically, I mean, for Kiki, while it's not ever explicitly said, is like, she likes to help people. So like, as long as she's not overthinking what other people are thinking about her,
which for a 13-year-old is going to be virtually impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
But when she's being selfless, that's when she's most capable.
Right.
Because she's like, she shows up to that elderly woman's place and they're like, oh, I'm just going to pay you and not, you don't need to deliver that. And she's like, no, we can do this. Like, I'll make the fire and like, we'll bake this thing and then I'll carry it out. And while we're waiting, I'll scrub your floors. Like,
she's great.
But yeah, Kiki's like the best person in the world. But she still has those little struggles that, I mean, anybody who's finding themselves encounters. It like, while Castle in the Sky has like finding of age components to
Yeah,
it. This is
coming of age.
like the coming of age.
Yeah, no, I feel like of all of the films I've seen, it's the clearest. Like, I'm walking through a new like gateway to adulthood, and I have expectations of me that I am so not sure that I can meet yet, and I feel like those are the sort of stories that will appeal to so many people, because I feel like even when you do like reach adulthood, you never stop having those nagging feelings.
Oh yeah, and like and that's why like for kids, like subtextually, while they might not get it and they'll just be delighted by like, oh, Kiki's going on a wild adventure and like she has to run away from crows, like that is still like sinking in for them as like, oh, it's okay to falter and doubt as long as you like recognize what your passions and like how you can sort of power those things.
So all of that said, I'm gonna probably say this is a Gryffindor.
I think it's a Gryffindor as well.
Yeah, like it'd be silly to even like
no
try.
debate. No debate required.
Yeah.
Next film, it's Princess Mononoke, which is I was telling you off mic that I recently saw this at like presented on screen and with subtitles, and like it was I guess like,
oh good, subtitles.
Yeah, no, don't worry, you don't have to look down at me from your ivory tower so much. But I saw it and like it was like a fresh print, and it was just pristine and great. And like also I need to say this is like independent of like any of the film specific, but like Miyazaki is a king when it comes to using silence. And silence is used, I can't recall from Totoro, but in Castle in the Sky, Kiki's Delivery Service, and in Princess Mononoke, the like most impactful moments are the ones where they just pull all the sound out. And you're just watching, like in Castle in the Sky, it's when Pozu is in the dragon's lair, which is like a crackling tornado of lightning, and it just is like crackle, 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 and then it just goes silent, and he sees like his dad like briefly, and like I'm tearing up just talking about it, because like it like the minute that they pull out the sound, you're like, oh god, like, and you're just in it, because it's like this intense shot of like real close up on his face, and it's like just black and white, and it's chaos, and then he just sees that, and you're like, oh my god. And then the same with Kiki. She has this moment where like she's got to perform this rescue, but like she hasn't been able to successfully take off with the broom, and then it's just like her concentrating, and it's her with the broom, and they pull the sound out again, and you're like, get this, we want you to fly. And then in the case of Princess Mononoke, this is stepping way ahead into the plot, but it's King of the Forest, when King of the Forest shows up, and they just again rip out all the sound, and you don't hear its footsteps, and it's just silence, and you're like, that is power, that is raw like nature power. But anyway, Princess Mononoke. Okay. I'm so like,
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Why don't you give the?
I just wanted to have that like very very brief tangent.
No, it was a good.
Yeah,
it was a good tangent.
give us a brief synopsis of this guy.
I mean, you guys can jump in on this, but it's I'm not remembering the character's name, but it's, I believe he's a prince, right?
That's right.
So this prince is in a,
His name is Ashitaka.
So he's in a like not like a rural area. And this boar, going back to Miyazaki and his love of pigs, comes like lumbering forward from the forest, and he's like covered in these red and black worms that are like ripping apart his face, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's a demon.
Yeah.
We have to kill it. They manage to fell the beast after the prince, like with great speed and skill. I forget the name of his steed, but like they have like some fun maneuvering, and he manages to fell the beast, and they discover there's, if I'm not mistaken, they find like a pellet.
Yeah. Iron ball.
An iron ball deep inside this boar. However, before he fells the beast, his arm is like enwrapped in these ragworm demon things, and so he's scarred and it like burns, and every now and again throughout the movie when he's enraged, like his arm seizes up and he's like not able to fully control it, or he's given
that sounds like a metaphor,
or given like incredible strength. It's like it's this primal tearing apart of himself. And it's like slowly creeping up his body and corrupting him. It's great. So they're like, oh my gosh, we need to figure out where this like pellet came from. So he goes on a journey and he winds up getting to the Iron Works, which is, I mean, this again is it's a man versus nature tale, which is also why probably of all these films is like the most near and dear to me, because as you probably all know, listeners, like I'm a huge softie for nature.
And I hear this is probably one of the most violent, like actually like
this one
really
is
violent.
So violent.
And Michael loves ultra violence, so this one is like definitely right up his alley.
I don't know why you're going to assert I love ultra violence.
You've been in so many fist fights.
That's not a true thing. I was getting all passionate, and then you're like, and ultra violence throwing under the bus.
It was a good bit. I saw Katie throwing it from my position in the room where we're recording.
So he shows up at the Ironworks and he meets the head of the city there. And this Ironworks is like all the women are working the bellows to like smelt the iron to build weapons, so that the men and the soldiers can basically work their way further and further into the forest to expand. But they are constantly running into opposition of Princess Mononoke, San, right? It's San?
It's
Her
San.
name. Yeah. And she is human in body, but the spirit of a wolf. And so she rides on the back of her mother or her sisters. Right? They're her sisters, correct?
I didn't know that.
Or siblings at the very least. But and she basically is like the champion of the forest. And what you learned through
there's like the images of them like cutting down the forest to get more like basically like land, and to like the people at like literally fighting the forest is a really, really powerful image in this film.
The visuals to all of these Ghibli films are exceptional, but this one is like spellbinding. Like, I mean, it's also probably the first time where they like really start messing around with like water and like more elementals. Like they've messed around with like wind a lot in the first few. But this one was like, because like I remember watching Spirited Away, jumping over to Spirited Away again, where they like go into lavish detail with like water splooshing and stuff like that, like the way it like swills about. But there's just like a lot going on visually as far as the nature components that they're like, we're going to lean even harder. If you thought that we've done this before, like, no, let me show you how crazy this can be. But so through a fair amount of back and forth to kind of breeze through, because this is actually rather plotty. Like I'd say this is the most plot driven.
Lot happens.
Lot going back and forth. Basically, Princess Mononoke and Prince are like, we need to protect the forest. We need to fight the humans. There's also like warring that is taking place within the factions of the various animals of the forest, because there are the boars who feel abandoned because one of the brothers who the prince fought was sort of became that demon. They take beef with the wolves, and the wolves have beef with the apes who are also there. And the apes are like super strange.
Oh,
in the
really?
whole oh yeah, because they're not. I mean, they're arguing kind of on behalf of man and like blaming the forest people for letting this happen, but then they also want to stay in the forest. It's odd. There's a lot of just like, there's a lot of both animal politics, but also gender politics that are going on here, because the whole argument throughout it is like, the women need to stay over here and the men need to do this. But the women, like, time and time again are being like, I mean, truthfully, Miyazaki does this frequently where it's like Mama in Castle in the Sky is like, she's the strongest character and like all the guys with her are buffoons. And and with what is the name of the captain of the Ironworks?
Oh, I am not sure.
But like, she's the clearly the best fighter, and also like has kind of a buffoonish like captain of the guard with her, who's like easily angered and constantly like challenging people. But they're constantly throwing these moral quandaries for the viewer because you're like, oh, well, clearly you're bad, but then she takes the prince aside and is like, oh, by the way, you might not have known this, but like, I also care for lepers. So you're like, oh, like, so you're not just a selfish person. You care for people, but the lepers are also making guns.
Right.
So
that,
like,
well, one thing I think about Miyazaki, the heroes and villains, like the heroes are almost like uniformly like incredibly good, like what, or at least by Western standards, we're like, oh my god, these are wonderful people. Whereas I think
you'd be labeling all of them Mary Sues,
exactly,
as that like argument goes.
In Japan, I think they're more, or that type of character is more normal. Like that type of like really hardworking, striving, like is a very. That's like a very Japanese ethic and like
they're the moral
character.
Compass.
Exactly. But the bad characters generally are not completely evil.
Right.
So you still have like, even though, we would probably, a lot of them, if we looked at like, you know, these incredibly capable, like Nausicaa, another movie we're not talking about, but like Nausicaa is, by many Western standards, like absolutely Mary Sue. She's like beautiful. She's incredibly talented. She's like a great fighter. She's like great at everything. There's like nothing that she's bad at.
Yeah.
And yet you still, you know, you're still rooting for her because she's up against these enormous, like environmental or societal, or like they face an enormous challenge.
Well, what they managed to do that allows the viewer to be like, I don't know how this is going to go, is because they throw all these layers onto like why they're doing what they're doing. So you see both sides and you're like, oh, well, I understand and empathize with both parties, but like one clearly has to be wrong, right? Like,
and do you think this is maybe because of the way that the things that we value in American culture are definitely more like personal achievement and like beating out everyone else. So our villains tend to have that singular, very simplistic, like, I'm going to get mine. Whereas like maybe if you're not brought up in a culture where that's like what you should be doing, good or bad, in Japan, like maybe like it's just like a different perspective of like, I'm going to be doing the best thing for society.
Right.
To like do my part, but it ends up being something that's hostile or toxic or unhealthy.
I just like the fact that throughout this movie you find yourself changing sides so frequently. I feel the movie does a very good job of, while clearly it is at least from my perspective, it is clearly more in favor of nature, it is still presenting the argument for humanity without being damning.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like it's heartbreaking what we're doing to the environment, but also like we just as like a collective species are not super deft at like figuring out how to care for all of the people that we have created.
Right.
And like we have to create waste, and we have to figure out like, well, what is the proper amount of waste that can be considered ethical? What is the proper amount of damage or destruction that can be considered ethical? And I think that's like a really, really big struggle that we don't necessarily tackle enough in in Western media.
when it is tackled, it oftentimes is tackled in a very heavy-handed
it's
fashion,
preachy,
which
or like confusing. Like I think of like Fern Gully is one of the only films that I can think of that talks about like the relationship between man and the environment and what man's doing to the environment.
Right. And even that is like pretty on the nose throughout the whole time. Whereas Mononoke is like, well, clearly in favor of nature, they're at least providing and presenting both sides of the coin, and also keeping a lot of nature's like angle while showing like, oh, nature's at war with itself, and keeping these elements of mystery. Like the king of the forest is like, what is that? Like, and then when you have, I mean, it saves several characters, but the idea of obviously corruption through humanity's like destruction of nature,
and that's even like something that I think is borrowed from, or not necessarily borrowed from, but definitely shows up in Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, where there is just this thing called miasma that is like spreading across the continent, and like they try to get to the sea, and the sea is like made of acid, and I forget where I wanted to go from that, but anyway, there are many echoes of like humanity corrupting nature all through Miyazaki stuff.
So this is definitely the most complicated, I feel like, of the plots. It's definitely the one that deals with like a lot like heavier repercussions of people's actions, and so you two seem way more familiar with it. Where do you think this one lands in the Sorting Hat?
I'm going every which way but Ravenclaw.
Yeah.
Okay, definitely agree. It's not a Ravenclaw movie. To me, it's either.
It's probably a bit harsh to be Hufflepuff too. To be honest.
Yeah,
so it would be, but it's like a very thin line.
It has the nature messaging, and it has like the sort of can't we all get along angle that a Hufflepuff would frequently take, and that's like, I mean, that's what our hero is fighting for the whole time, is like, let's try to find a balance, but like ultimately a handful of things have to give. So I guess we can rule out Hufflepuff.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it is. I think you either side with the heroic side of the story and toss it into Gryffindor, or you side with the kind of darker side of the story and the what's done must be done, or like we're doing what we have to do.
I'll throw in here my personal theory of how the houses of Hogwarts work. I don't know anything about the story, but I do have like a specific idea of how these like horoscope sort of things like ultimately are bigger picture. I see Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws as being not necessarily interested in glory and personal glory or fame. They're just very much like passionate about the things that they are just good at. Whereas like Slytherins and Gryffindors to me are very much like definitely reaching for glory, definitely want like to be beloved, but it all comes down to whether they are self-serving, which I believe Slytherins tend to be self-serving, whereas Gryffindors will be more likely to martyr themselves, and even if part of it is selfish, it's usually like going towards a greater good. So that's how I would, even if a Gryffindor does something really fucked up, they might necessarily be not necessarily doing it for self-serving reasons.
This is where it gets complicated, because I feel our hero is selfless in their action, which would make, if you wanted to by proxy say,
well,
like,
you're saying Princess Mononoke is selfless.
Both our heroes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Both our heroes are selfless in like they're willing to give up so much like for the greater good.
Right.
And that like by proxy would mean like our heroes coming together are like make the movie a Gryffindor. But by that same token, if you're looking at the thematic implications,
right,
and like what that is driving to do, it's more of a Slytherin, because it's looking to say like, hey, here this is, like, you need to be aware of this and rectify, and like, I've got one purpose and it's this one thing.
And since the purpose of our podcast is not necessarily to sort the individual characters,
exactly,
then I think that we'd have to go the direction of the overarching thematic elements and plot. So so would we ultimately put this in Slytherin?
It's very interesting because it does. I mean, it's so like initially going into this, I actually, before we even started, I thought that Princess Mononoke was going to be a Hufflepuff based on like its nature themes and trying to like balance things out. And I feel like an argument is definitely valid within that camp. But the balancing act and the amount of just acrobatics that this movie needed to do and successfily does is something, I mean, to eye this needle or to thread the eye of the needle.
Thread the needle.
Thread the needle.
Through the eye.
Yeah, through the eye. You're threading the eye of the needle. Is something that requires great skill, technical, cunning. It needs to be well executed. So, like, strangely, I find declaring this a Slytherin, like, completely valid.
Yeah.
But, like, not at all what going into this I would have perceived it to be.
Well, just like all Slytherins are not bad people.
No.
Not all Slytherin films are going to be about evil either.
No.
Yep.
Fair enough.
So we did it. We sorted Miyazaki's, like, obviously. Oh, and like for more context, Princess Mononoke was intended to be his last film.
Oh, he's said that many a time.
But because this was the first one that like totally like got hit out of the park. This was up in 97. Up until then, E.T., like in 82 or whatever it was that got released there, was the highest grossing film ever made in Japan. This one beat it, and then unfortunately got immediately beaten by Titanic the same year. But it was like such a shift, not just for Miyazaki and Ghibli themselves. Was that a Ghibli film?
What was it?
Princess Mononoke.
Yeah, it was Ghibli.
It was a very big shift culturally for Japan too, and it was directly because this film's success that he then went on to make Spirited Away, which is like, those two films are considered, like, at least by viewers out here, to be like his two greatest films.
Not
right?
Michael Bilo.
Not
but,
me.
Not
Spirited
for Bilo.
Spirited Away is like
but most
whatever.
people consider that to be.
But
Right.
yeah, I watched Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke on the same day my senior year of college, and I watched Spirited Away first because it was like I had heard more about it, and I was like, that's okay. And then I watched Princess Mononoke, and I was floored.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, these are masterpieces. If you haven't like yet like dipped into it, like, because you're like, oh, cartoons are for children. I definitely say this would be a primer of like
It's a great exposure, not just to some exceptional anime, but also a lot of the ideology that informs a lot of Japanese culture.
and it's just great storytelling in general.
Oh, yeah.
And just the kind that you're not going to get
And
here.
the characters are so fun. Like, we didn't even discuss like the characters of the comedy that they pepper
they're
throughout.
really funny.
Is so wonderful. Both like it's more, I would say, physical, perhaps in part by translation, just like being what it is. But the physicality of all the characters is so wonderful. The character designs, the creature designs,
it's just like it's so great. So really go if you haven't seen one before.
Yeah, and we've not spoiled the plots to any of them. We've like hinted at where things are headed, but like you should still have more than enough surprises in watching all of this.
So you won't be surprised by how little Totoro there is in My Neighbor Totoro. There's like so little Totoro.
Yeah, you have been warned, and with that, I would like to thank you, Michael Bilo, for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, where can we find you on social media if anyone wants to reach out to you?
I mean, I have a Twitter, but mostly I just use it to retweet my best friend Eileen O'Connell at @I_lean.
I would co-sign that recommendation.
Yeah.
You
But the
also
Dark Matters
can
podcast has their own Twitter handle.
Go check out the Dark Matters show. We're on iTunes.
Yeah.
It's
That
called
is This Is Dark Matters.
This is Dark Matters, or come check us out live. We've got a show the fourth Thursday of the month at the Pack Theater at 11 p.m.
They're doing their next one on Hollywood
Secrets.
Yeah, and honestly, the backlog is so fun. It's maybe the best thing to come out of the Pack Theater here. Me and Bilo are both company members of the Pack Theater. Yep. All of the shows are pay what you can. So if you want to come see Dark Matters, This is Dark Matters live, know that just come and check us out if you're in the LA area. We'd love to have you, or you can call in If you go to the Dark Matters website, we have the telephone number that you can call in.
And that
for any
phone
of the
number
shows.
is 818-650-DARK.
And you can follow Katie Reed at that Katie Reed.
Hit me up.
And you can follow me at Belated Media on Twitter. And you can certainly, and we'd really appreciate it if you provide a review for us on iTunes or Google Play, because we're up on there and happy to receive reviews. And you can tweet at us what theme suggestions or people that you'd love on as guests, and we can reach out and try and make that happen. And with that, thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Sorting Hat.
Thank you.